Let me ask you something. What would you do if the person who swore to protect you, the person who put a ring on your finger and promised you forever, decided to let you die? What if he did it while you were carrying his children, alone and terrified in a cold hospital room? Tonight, I'm going to tell you the story of Ilara, a woman who was 8 months pregnant with twins when her billionaire husband left her for his mistress. He didn't just leave her, he tried to ruin her, refusing to pay the hospital bills that were keeping her and their unborn babies alive. He thought she was weak. He thought she was broken. He was about to find out how catastrophically wrong he was, because while he was toasting his new life with champagne, Ilara was dismantling his old one, piece by painful piece. What happened next will shock you, but I promise, it is a story of justice you will want to stay for. The afternoon it all began was painfully, beautifully ordinary. Sunlight, thick and golden like honey, poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse. Ilara rested a hand on the taut swell of her belly, feeling the familiar flutter and kick of two distinct lives within. Twins. Two tiny heartbeats that had become the entire rhythm of her world. The city sprawled below, a silent, glittering map of the kingdom she shared with her husband, Julian Croft. He was a titan of industry, a man carved from ambition and charisma, and she was his adored wife, or so she believed. Julian was late, as he often was. His empire didn't run on a 9-to-5 schedule. Ilara didn't mind. She used the quiet hours to prepare, nesting in the way nature demanded of her. Today, she had been sorting through his travel receipts for their accountant, a mundane task she performed every quarter. It was a ritual of their shared life, a small act of partnership. She liked the order of it, the neat columns of figures, the tangible record of their journey together. She picked up a small stack of receipts from his latest trip to Zurich. A black corporate card, his name embossed in silver. Flights, 5-star hotels, dinners at places with more Michelin stars than she could count. It was all standard, expected. But then, tucked between a bill for a $1,000 bottle of wine and a charge for a hotel suite, was a flimsy slip of paper from a jeweler. Cartier. Not unusual. Julian loved to surprise her. Her heart gave a little skip of anticipation. Perhaps this was the reason for his recent distraction. A birthday surprise, maybe? She unfolded the receipt. Her eyes scanned the line items, a small smile playing on her lips. And then the smile froze. It shattered like thin ice. One item. A necklace. L'Étoile du Soir. The evening star. The price made her breath catch in her throat. It was more than the cost of a luxury car. A number with so many zeros, it looked like a mistake. But it was not the price that struck her. It was the fact that she had never seen it. Her birthday had passed 2 months ago. Their anniversary was not for another 3. This star had not risen in her sky. A cold dread, sharp and unwelcome, pierced the warm bubble of her afternoon. It was a single, discordant note in the perfect symphony of her life. She folded the receipt, her fingers suddenly clumsy. She tucked it back into the stack, her movements precise, automatic. On the outside, she was calm, a serene, pregnant wife tidying her husband's affairs. But inside, a fault line had just cracked open, and she could feel the ground beneath her feet beginning to tremble. She looked out at the city again, but the glittering lights now seemed distant and mocking. The sun was still shining, but for Ilara, a sudden and chilling eclipse had begun. That night, Julian came home wreathed in apologies and the scent of expensive cologne. He kissed her, his lips cool against her cheek, and placed a hand on her stomach. "How are my boys doing?" he asked. his voice the same warm baritone that had first captivated her. "They're kicking up a storm," she replied, her own voice a marvel of control. She did not mention the receipt. She did not ask about the necklace. Instead, she watched him, really watched him, for the first time in a long time. She saw the subtle tension in his jaw, the way his eyes didn't quite meet hers, the flicker of something unreadable in their depths. He was a stranger wearing her husband's face. The trusting victim inside her wanted to scream, to demand, to cry. But another part of her, a colder, more ancient part, held her back. It whispered a single, chilling word. Wait. The waiting was a special kind of torment. For the next week, Ilara lived in a state of hypervigilance. She performed her role flawlessly, the loving wife, the expectant mother. She smiled when Julian smiled. She laughed at his jokes. She discussed baby names and nursery colours. But every moment was a lie. Her heart had become a block of ice in her chest, and her mind was a whirring, analytical machine, gathering data. The pivot began late one night. Julian was asleep, his deep, even breaths a sound she used to find comforting. Now it was the sound of her jailer's slumber. She slipped out of bed, the weight of the twins making her movements slow and deliberate. She went to his study, the room that was the nerve center of his empire. His laptop was on the desk, sleeping, just like its owner. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Password. It would be something arrogant, something sentimental that he believed was clever. She tried his birthday. Access denied. He tried his company's founding date. Access denied. Then a bitter laugh almost escaped her lips. She typed in their wedding anniversary. October 24th. Access granted. The screen flared to life, a portal into his secret world. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it. To use the date he pledged his life to her as the key to his betrayal. The ice in her chest hardened, its edges sharpening. Grief was a luxury she could no longer afford. It was being replaced by something colder, stronger, rage, pure, distilled, and utterly silent. She started with his emails, a folder innocently labeled Projects. Inside, a subfolder named Isabella. Her name was Isabella. Of course it was. It sounded like whispered secrets and Italian villas. Ilara clicked it open. The screen filled with words of love. Not the comfortable, lived-in love he offered Ilara, but a fiery, desperate, all-consuming passion. Sonnets of devotion, promises of a future, plans. So many plans. He spoke of his current situation as a temporary obstacle. He called his marriage a business arrangement that had run its course. He called his unborn children complications. Complications. The word echoed in the silent room. Her babies, her sons. They were not sons to him. They were line items in a ledger of inconvenience. The rage solidified into something diamond hard. It was no longer a hot, blinding emotion. It was a tool, a weapon. She methodically began to forward every single email to a new, anonymous account she had created that afternoon. She copied travel itineraries, scanned hotel confirmations, downloaded attachments, photos of Julian and Isabella in Paris, on a yacht in Monaco, her neck adorned with a brilliant, star-shaped diamond necklace. L'étoile du soir, she worked for hours, a silent, pregnant ghost in the heart of his kingdom, downloading the blueprints of its destruction. Every click of the mouse was a nail in his coffin. She found financial statements for offshore accounts she never knew existed. Shell corporations registered in the Cayman Islands. A draft of a prenuptial agreement, not for her, but for him and Isabella, He was building a new life on the ashes of their old one, and he was using their shared wealth to do it. When she was done, she cleared the browser history, deleted the sent emails from his account, and closed the laptop. She crept back into bed. Julian stirred, throwing an arm around her in his sleep, pulling her close. The gesture, once a comfort, now felt like a violation. She lay there, rigid, feeling the warmth of his body, and planned his ruin. The trusting victim was gone. In her place, a strategist was being born. 2 weeks later, the world tilted on its axis. Elara woke to a stabbing pain in her abdomen and a terrifying tightness in her chest. The doctor's voice on the phone was urgent. Preeclampsia, severe. She needed to get to the hospital immediately. Julian was in a board meeting. Elara called him, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain calm. "Julian, something's wrong. The doctor said I have to go to the hospital, now." There was a pause. She could hear muffled voices in the background. "Elara, can this wait? I'm in the middle of closing the Takahashi deal. This is worth billions." "No, it can't wait," she whispered, a wave of dizziness washing over her. "It's the babies." A heavy, impatient sigh. "Fine. Call an Uber. I'll meet you there when I can. Text me the details." The line went dead. He didn't come. Hours bled into one another in the sterile white room. Nurses bustled in and out, their faces etched with professional concern. Machines beeped a steady, unnerving rhythm. Elara lay tethered to an IV drip, her body a battleground. She sent him texts. He replied with short, perfunctory messages. "Still in meeting. Deal is at a critical stage. We'll be there soon." Soon never came. That evening, a private investigator she had hired with the last of her personal savings sent her a single email. The pivot was about to become a freefall. The subject line was simple: confirmation. The attachment was a photograph. It was time-stamped just 1 hour ago. It was Julian. He was not in a boardroom. He was at a table at Per Se, the city's most exclusive restaurant. Across from him, smiling, was Isabella. They were holding hands. In the center of the table was a black velvet ring box, open. He wasn't closing a billion-dollar deal. He was proposing to another woman while his wife and children were in a high-risk maternity ward. Despair. It was a physical force, a crushing weight that stole the air from her lungs. This was it, the bottom, the absolute, undeniable confirmation of his monstrousness. Tears she had refused to shed now streamed down her face, hot and silent. He wasn't just neglectful. He was cruel. His betrayal wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, made with casual, smiling brutality. She was alone, utterly and completely alone. Her hand, shaking, reached for her phone. The tears stopped. The despair, so vast and oceanic, receded, leaving behind a shoreline of pure, cold clarity. She had hit the bottom, and the only way left to go was up. She scrolled through her contacts, past her mother, past her friends, until she found the one name she needed: Chloe, her best friend from law school. Now, a shark, the most feared divorce attorney in the state. She pressed the call button. Chloe answered on the second ring. "Elara, what's wrong? I got your text about the hospital. Is everything okay?" Elara took a deep, shuddering breath. The voice that came out was not the voice of a victim. It was the voice of a client. "No," she said, her tone flat and devoid of emotion. "Nothing is okay, but it's about to be. I need to hire you, and I need you to find me the biggest, most ruthless monster you know in corporate litigation. Julian has a rival, a man named Marcus Sterling. I want to meet him, immediately." There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line, and then Chloe's voice, low and dangerous. "Consider it done. I'm on my way." The war room was not a room at all. It was the corner suite of Chloe's law firm, a glass-walled cage overlooking the city lights. 2 days after her release from the hospital, on strict orders for bed rest, Ilara sat at the head of a massive mahogany table. She was flanked by Chloe, whose presence was a force field of competence, and a man who seemed to have been chiseled from granite and ambition, Marcus Sterling. Sterling was Julian's shadow, the one rival he could never fully best. He was older, quieter, and possessed an aura of immense coiled power. He had listened for an hour without interruption as Ilara and Chloe laid out the situation. They presented the emails, the financial records, the photographs. Ilara spoke with the detached precision of a general briefing her troops, her pregnancy the only sign of her physical vulnerability. When she finished, Sterling leaned forward, his steepled fingers the only point of stillness in the room. His eyes, a pale, piercing blue, were fixed on Ilara. He was not looking at a broken woman. He was looking at an opportunity. "Mr. Croft," Sterling said, his voice a low rumble, "has always suffered from a fatal flaw. He mistakes kindness for weakness. He believes your domesticity was a sign of your simplicity. He has no idea who he married." He gave a thin, predatory smile. "I have wanted to dismantle his company for a decade. He built it on a stolen idea, my idea. But he insulated himself well. You, Mr. Croft, have just given me the key to his front door." The plan they formulated was not a divorce strategy. It was a corporate decapitation. It was a military campaign. Phase 1 was asset control. "You own the summer house in the Hamptons outright, correct?" Chloe asked. "An inheritance from your grandmother." Ilara nodded. "Good. We sell it. Tomorrow. It will give us a liquid war chest. We operate outside of any joint accounts." Phase 2 was financial warfare. They brought in a forensic accountant, a man so discreet he was practically a ghost. His job was to trace every dollar Julian had funneled into his offshore empire. "We don't just want to find it," Sterling stated. "We want to prove it's marital property, acquired through fraudulent conveyance. We will petition the court to freeze everything. But not yet." Phase 3 was the corporate strike. Sterling's team would use the information Ilara had gathered, Julian's over-leveraged positions, his secret debts, to orchestrate a hostile takeover of Croft Industries. "He's distracted," Sterling mused. "He's in love. He thinks he's on top of the world. He won't see us coming until my name is on his office door." Phase 4 was the decisive moment. The strike had to be timed to perfection. Ilara knew exactly when that would be. "Christmas," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "He's taking her to Aspen for Christmas. He told me it was a solo retreat to clear his head before the babies come." The bitter irony was not lost on anyone in the room. He would be celebrating his new future while they systematically erased his past. The final piece was a masterstroke of legal maneuvering suggested by Chloe. Years ago, for estate planning purposes, Julian had insisted Ilara sign a durable power of attorney, giving her control over their shared assets if he were ever incapacitated. "His arrogance will be his undoing," Chloe said with a grim smile. "We are going to argue that his actions, his flagrant affair, his abandonment of you during a medical emergency, his fraudulent movement of assets, constitute a form of financial and emotional incapacitation regarding his fiduciary duty to the marriage. It's a novel argument. It's aggressive. And with the evidence you have, I believe a judge in a private emergency hearing will grant it." Ilara looked at the faces around the table, the fierce loyalty in Chloe's eyes, the cold, calculating hunger in Sterling's. This was her army. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sliver of something that was not rage or grief. It was power. She was no longer a passenger in her own life. She was at the helm, steering directly into the storm. The days leading up to Christmas were a blur of quiet, intense activity. Ilara, confined to her penthouse, became a remote commander. She spent her days on encrypted phone calls with Chloe, the accountant, and Sterling's team. She signed documents delivered by discreet couriers. She watched her husband pack his ski gear, a pit of cold satisfaction growing in her stomach. On Christmas Eve morning, he stood at the door, duffel bag in hand. He looked impossibly handsome, his face glowing with anticipation. He bent to kiss her, a perfunctory gesture. "Be good," he said, patting her enormous belly. "Try not to have these guys until I get back. Daddy needs a few days on the slopes." "I'll do my best," she said, her smile a perfect porcelain mask. She watched from the window as his car pulled away, disappearing into the city traffic. The moment it was gone, she made her first call. "He's left." The execution began, while Julian's private jet ascended into the winter sky. Ilara was on the phone with a real estate agent. The Hamptons house, her inheritance, was sold in a cash deal that closed in 4 hours, flooding her new private account with capital. While Julian and Isabella drank champagne at 30,000 feet, laughing as they flew towards the Rockies, Ilara was on a conference call with Chloe and a sympathetic judge. Chloe laid out the case, presenting the mountain of evidence. The power of attorney was activated. Ilara now had legal control of their primary residence and all known joint assets, while Julian presented Isabella with a pair of diamond earrings to match her necklace upon landing in Aspen. Ilara was authorizing the transfer of every cent from their joint checking and savings accounts into a trust managed by Chloe's firm. The accounts were left with a balance of 0. The next day, Christmas Day, was a symphony of destruction. At 9 a.m., as Julian and Isabella were having Christmas breakfast in their lavish mountain chalet, a team of movers, hired by Ilara, descended on the penthouse. They worked with quiet efficiency, packing her belongings, the nursery furniture, every personal item that belonged to her and her children. Everything else, Julian's custom suits, his art collection, his first edition books, was left behind. At 11 a.m., as Julian was on the ski lift, snapping a selfie with Isabella to send to his friends, Marcus Sterling initiated the hostile takeover. He triggered covenants on Julian's largest loans, using his network of banks to call in the debts simultaneously. Croft Industries stock went into freefall. At 2 p.m., as Julian proposed a toast to their future on a sun-drenched terrace, Ilara was on the phone with a real estate broker. Armed with the power of attorney, she accepted an all-cash, below-market value offer for their penthouse. The deal was structured to close in 24 hours. The buyer was a shell corporation owned by Marcus Sterling. At 5 p.m., as Julian and Isabella were getting massages at the hotel spa, the forensic accountant successfully petitioned an international court to freeze 12 offshore accounts and 4 shell corporations linked to Julian, citing evidence of criminal fraud. Over $300 million were instantly paralyzed. Ilara spent her Christmas Day not in a hospital bed or a lonely penthouse, but in a new, secure apartment leased under a corporate name. The nursery was already set up. Chloe was with her, a bottle of non-alcoholic champagne on the table between them. There were no tears, no regrets, just the cold, clean hum of a machine working perfectly. She had not destroyed his life in a fit of passion. She had dismantled it like an outdated business, liquidating its assets and terminating its liabilities. 3 days later, Julian returned. He was tan, relaxed, and humming to himself as the taxi pulled up to his building. He stepped out, looked up, and stopped. A large, garish sold banner was stretched across the balcony of his penthouse. His penthouse. A flicker of confusion, then annoyance. A mistake by the building management, surely. He strode into the lobby. The doorman, a man he had tipped generously for years, looked at him with a strange mix of pity and fear. "Mr. Croft," the doorman stammered. You're not allowed upstairs. The new owners have taken possession." "The new owners?" Julian barked a laugh. "I am the owner. There must be some mistake." "No mistake, sir." Julian pushed past him, his heart starting to hammer against his ribs. He took the private elevator up. The key card was rejected. Access denied. A cold spike of dread, the same feeling Ilara had felt weeks ago, shot through him. He used the emergency override code. The doors opened. He stepped into an echo. The apartment was cavernous, empty. The furniture was gone. The art was gone. His clothes were gone. Everything was gone. Everything except for a single, large manila envelope sitting in the dead center of the vast marble kitchen island. His footsteps echoed as he approached it. His hands trembled as he tore it open. The first thing he saw was a photograph. It was of him and Isabella in Aspen, clinking champagne glasses. On the back, in Ilara's elegant script, was a single word: complication. Beneath it were the divorce papers. Irreconcilable differences. Then, copies of the frozen offshore account statements, stamped with the seal of an international court. Then, the notice of the sale of the penthouse, signed with Ilara's name via her power of attorney. Then, a printout of Croft Industries' stock price, a vertical line plummeting into an abyss. Attached was a press release. Marcus Sterling announces successful acquisition of Croft Industries. He sank to the floor, the papers scattering around him. It was impossible. A nightmare. Ilara. His quiet, sweet, domestic Ilara. She couldn't have done this. She wouldn't know how. His phone rang. It was his bank. His corporate cards had been declined. His personal accounts were empty. He called his lawyer. "She can't do this," he screamed into the phone. "Julian," his lawyer's voice was grave. "She already has. It's all legal. That power of attorney." "My God, man, what were you thinking?" Then, in the midst of his world collapsing, another call came through. It was the hospital. His rage found a target. "Mr. Croft," a stern administrator said, "we are calling about the outstanding bill for your wife's emergency care and the subsequent delivery of your twin sons 2 days ago." The words barely registered. Sons. They were born. "I'm not paying it," he spat, the words tasting like venom. "She wants to play this game. Fine. Let her figure it out. It's her bill." It was a pathetic final attempt to exert control, to cause pain. There was a pause. "Sir, there seems to be a misunderstanding. The bill has been paid." Julian was stunned. "Paid? By who? She doesn't have that kind of money." "It was settled in full this morning, sir. All $975,000 of it." "By who?" Julian demanded, his voice cracking. "By a Mr. Marcus Sterling," the administrator replied coolly. "He said to tell you, congratulations on the acquisition. He also bought the hospital's outstanding debt portfolio. Technically, Julian, you now owe him." Click. The phone fell from his numb fingers. It was over. He hadn't just been outmaneuvered. He had been erased. His money, his company, his home, even his ability to be cruel, had been taken from him. He was a ghost in the ruins of a life he had burned down himself. Miles away, in a sun-drenched apartment high above the city, Ilara stood by a window, holding her 2 sleeping sons. They were small, perfect, their tiny chests rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. She looked down at their faces, and then out at the sprawling metropolis below. It was no longer his kingdom. It was her landscape, a world of possibility. She was not a victim. She was not a wife. She was a founder, the architect of her own life, built on the rubble of his. And as federal agents, tipped off by Sterling about Julian's financial crimes, moved in to make an arrest, Ilara Croft did not look back. She was too busy looking forward,